People live vastly different lives every day, and we spend lifetimes walking the path that we want to or that we think we should. Despite that, I think a human life can be divided into four main phases: infanthood, adolescence, adulthood, and old age. For us, it's not just time that passes, because through the years we grow and develop mentally and physically. Our feelings and emotions change, the way we process them, and even how we choose to articulate them changes. First, let's figure out the basic difference between emotions and feelings. Emotions. Emotions are bodily reactions that are activated through neurotransmitters in the brain, and feelings are the conscious experiences of those very same emotions. A baby can only cry or gurgle depending on the situation, but those two sounds are what it has to communicate its emotions. Adults sometimes cry out of happiness or laugh in frustration. While the level may change over time, the emotions we feel remain largely constant throughout our lives. Makes it sound important, doesn't it? Something that we deal with every day for our entire lives. You'd think that more people would know how to handle them. As a teenager, I think the sentence or the stereotype that I've heard the most is that teenagers are hormonal. This is just a phase, you'll grow out of it, which is honestly one of my least favorite things to hear. You can't just lump a huge demographic together and collectively assume that they're all unable to handle their feelings. And it's not like anyone teaches you how to handle them anyway, right? They say that to feel is to be human. But what happens when the same feelings get the better of us? Imagine you have a presentation or an important interview, and just before you leave the house, you have a huge fight with your family. Yelling, harsh words, the whole package. Now, on top of that anxiety and nervousness you must already have been feeling, there's probably anger, guilt, hurt. Your brain is already working overtime trying to categorize and work out those feelings. Do you really think you'll be able to effectively and calmly answer questions or present to the best of your ability? So not only is your efficiency compromised, but you're also fretting over whatever transpired for the rest of the day. And it just overall reduces your productivity. So what's the solution? That is what my talk today is about. Compartmentalization. Isn't it a mouthful? It's a concept that isn't talked about as much as it should be, despite being an integral part of our everyday existence. But it lives up to its name. So what exactly is compartmentalization? What does it mean? It's usually a defense mechanism in which someone tries to divide their thoughts and feelings into boxes, compartments, and sealing them shut until the time is appropriate to address them. In theory, it sounds really simple and easy, and you might even think it seems obvious, but in reality, it is hard to get control that fast. Personally, I remember doing it once when I had a test, and I hadn't submitted an assignment before that test, so my teacher scolded me. But then I was distracted throughout that test because I kept worrying about what my teacher had said prior, so I couldn't give it my all, even though I had studied for the test. So I think that is when I remember first trying to separate my thoughts and thinking, let me focus on this test, I will think about what is bothering me later. So there are healthy and unhealthy ways to compartmentalize, right? Like everything else, it is a double-edged sword. The most common negative outcome is when people put their thoughts into boxes but don't open those boxes, essentially bottling them up until they finally burst. You have to think of it as a pause button. You're hitting pause until you can come back and deal with it. So exactly how do you hit pause, right? I'm sure throughout the time I've been speaking, you've probably been thinking like, yeah, this seems pretty obvious. This seems like a reasonable solution, and it also seems like something we probably have been doing. So how do you make it more effective? So a few ways to compartmentalize. Number one, firstly, is to give a certain amount of time, like say an hour, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you have at hand. Just gather your thoughts and extremely focus on whatever you have on at that moment. For example, if you have a task that you're supposed to complete, focus on completing that task instead of worrying about what it is that's bothering you. On the contrary, if that isn't working, then use that hour or 15 minutes to focus on whatever it is that is bothering. But after that time finishes, then don't think about it for a while so that you can concentrate on whatever else you're doing. Another thing is to go onto autopilot, but not exactly autopilot, where you do things that don't require as much attention, but also that won't completely take your focus away from the whatever it was that was bothering you. So something like folding laundry or doing the dishes, it doesn't require a lot of brain power, but it also does distract you for the time being. Remember, you're not trying to distract yourself completely, you're not running away from what it is that's bothering you, so you're not procrastinating, you're just hitting pause and you'll come back to it later. It's not a new concept. People have always said that part of growing up is learning how to manage your emotions and put them aside when the situation calls for it. Take a soldier, for example. Serving in the military usually means that at some point you might have to kill someone to protect your country. While there is counseling available, how does one do it in the moment? How does he or she put aside his or her morality and in that kill or be killed situation? Compartmentalization. If they couldn't do it, they wouldn't be able to do their job effectively. They wouldn't be able to serve our country or whichever country they are serving. The only time this entire concept becomes a problem, like I said, is when it starts becoming a permanent state of self. It's like backlog. You have to keep clearing it up. You cannot keep things that have been bothering you, trauma, for example, inside for years and years and years, expecting it to just disappear if you push it to the back of your mind far enough. You have to deal with it. Either speak to someone you care about, speak to a professional, whatever it is. Because you're not running away, right? You're hitting pause, like I said. Compartmentalization is often misunderstood, but when applied correctly, it is probably the best tool we have at our disposal. Even the most driven, hardworking, intelligent people cannot function at their best if they cannot control their emotions. What separates you from millions in today's world? IQ, yes, but also EQ. Emotional quotient, of which a big part is our hold over our emotions. Healthy relationships are also formed when you understand what you're feeling, why you're feeling, and you can only understand that when you give yourself time to. Studies have also shown that compartmentalization helps you keep your cognitive functions separate, and it allows you to make rational decisions without overreaction. And it does get easier the more you do it. After all, practice makes perfect.